RFK Jr. is pissing off all the right people. He said that Biden's more of a threat to democracy than Trump, and boy, are they insane about it. We're going to show you all the gory details. It's nice. Also, she's back, Hillary Clinton. She wants to know why we even have to bother having an election. I mean, can we just get this over with and keep Biden for 4 more years? That's the Democrats for you. They really don't like democracy much, do they? Also, people are fed up in Chicago, and we're going to show you yet another city council meeting where just an average woman speaks her mind. And boy, the people of Chicago are feeling it, and they're hearing it, and you're going to hear it too. That and a whole lot more. My name is Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry. And I know it's weird for you to like a video before we even get started, but let's face it, at this point, likes are cheap out there. When you like something, you don't really like it. I mean, you're liking it in that you're trying to help us out because you know that by pushing like, you actually help increase the visibility of the work that we're doing. So I know you haven't quite decided whether you like this video or not, but just like it. Just like it because you know that the like is really just sort of no one's going to track you down. No one's going to, did you really like this? Just like the video, help us out and make sure you keep our content visible, boosted, and in front of everybody that you want to see it. By the way, hello to everybody streaming live with us right now at Rumble as we do daily at noon. If you're watching us after the fact, come join us sometime live at Rumble. It's fun. There's a little bit more of an edge to it. Anything can happen. You never know what might come out of my mouth. Let's get right to it. You never know what's going to come out of Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s mouth. He's a lifelong Democrat. He's the son of a Democrat Party icon. He wanted to run for president as a Democrat. But the Democrats, as I mentioned, don't really like democracy much. And so they kept him off the ballot. They kept him from participating in debates. In fact, they even said there will be no debates, even though he was polling like at 19-20% against Joe Biden. Nope, no debates, no votes, no discussion, no nothing. You will take this candidate and we will waltz him right into the general election. We're Democrats after all, and we love the democratic process. Given that process that he has been through, is it anyone's surprise that when he appeared on CNN last night and was challenged by Aaron Burnett about Donald Trump's existential threat to democracy, Robert Kennedy said, yeah, I've been experiencing a different kind of threat to democracy, and it's not from Mr. MAGA. Watch.
But do you really believe that when people talk about the threat to democracy that Trump poses, do you really think that is an equal evil to Biden?
I mean, listen, I can make the argument that President Biden is a much worse threat to democracy. And the reason for that is President Biden is the first candidate in history, the first president in history that has used the federal agencies to censor political speech, so to censor his opponent. I can say that because I just won a case in the Federal Court of Appeals and now before the Supreme Court. It shows that he started censoring not just me. For 37 hours after he took the oath of office, he was censoring me. No president in the country has ever done that. The greatest threat to democracy is not somebody who questions election returns, but a president of the United States who used the power of his office to force the social media companies, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, to open a portal and give access to that portal to the FBI, to the CIA, to the IRS, to CISA, to NIH, to censor his political critics. President Biden, for the first president in history, to use his power over the Secret Service to deny Secret Service protection to one of his political opponents for political reasons. He's weaponizing the federal agencies. Those are really critical threats to democracy.
Did you hear that? I'm not even going to let you listen to what Aaron Burnett says, but all she's got is, but Trump. She has no response to everything that RFK just laid out there. And by the way, that last point about Biden continuing to deny Secret Service protection for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the fact that his name is Robert F. Kennedy sort of adds a little extra level of disgust to Biden's cynical display here, doesn't it? I mean, after all, do we have to spell it out? I mean, his dad, when he was running for president in 1968, was assassinated by a lunatic Islamic terrorist Democrat, too. This is what they do. Democrats like to assassinate people. And so he's being denied. And it does. It adds a little bit of extra just vomitorium to the entire proceedings. But Aaron Burnett, I want to just go back to this beginning part real fast, and then we've got more on RFK Jr. But look at Aaron Burnett here.
But do you really believe that when people talk about the threat to democracy that Trump poses, do you really think that that is an equal evil?
When people talk about Trump's threat to democracy, you mean like our entire lineup here on CNN? Sir, are you denying that Trump is the greatest threat to democracy because you're sitting in a studio that was created and built on that premise? That's the reason we're here. It's all we've got is to terrify people about the existential threat to democracy. And of course, before you even comment, because of course we're on the same page here, it's not a threat to democracy. We are not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic, but we do use the democratic process to choose our representatives in this constitutional republic. And, well, I guess that's what they mean when they say threat to democracy. All right, so the reaction was swift and insane from the left last night. We'll get to that in a minute. But he woke up the next morning, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. did, waltzed his way over to the Fox and Friends set, and basically at this point now was in the position of responding to the controversy over Kennedy, daring to say that Joe Biden, by having control over the very channels of free speech in this country through the executive branch and determined to censor American people, that was in fact a huge threat to our process and to our Constitution. Here he was with the Fox and Friends gang.
Well, Robert, one of the big issues for Democrats they've talked about is the threat to democracy. You raised some eyebrows yesterday when you were comparing the former president to the current president. You said in an interview that you believe that Joe Biden is a bigger threat to democracy than Donald Trump. This is what you have to say. Watch.
When people talk about the threat to democracy that Trump poses, do you really think that that is an equal evil to Biden?
I mean, listen, I can make the argument that President Biden is a much worse threat to democracy.
Why did you say that?
And by the way, I said I can make that argument, and I think it's an argument that we ought to be having. President Biden has done something that no other president in history has done, which is to order media, particularly the social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Google, to censor his political opponents. And, I can say this because I just won a lawsuit in the Federal Court of Appeals now before the Supreme Court, because he began censoring me 37 hours after he took the oath of office, swearing to defend the Constitution. White House officials were on email with Facebook saying to them, you got to take down his post. Facebook actually pushed back and saying there's no misinformation here. This is actually what he's saying is accurate. And they had to make up a new term called malinformation, which is information that is accurate but nonetheless inconvenient to, politically inconvenient. So there's been the First Amendment was put in the Constitution. Madison, Hamilton had it, said we put it free expression to guarantee the First Amendment because all the other rights are dependent on it. If you have a president who can censor his political opponents, he has the license for any kind of atrocity. That is a genuine threat to our democracy. I think, what President Trump said about, about questioning the election and to the extent that he engaged in an effort to overthrow that, of course, that's a threat to democracy, but it is not the worst threat, undermining the First Amendment of our Constitution and then weaponizing the federal agencies to get his opponents off the ballot. And in my case, I just say particularly, denying me Secret Service protection. That's never happened in history.
You think he's behind that? What? Do you think Joe Biden is behind?
Of course he is.
Does he know that your dad was assassinated?
He has a bust of my father behind him at the Oval
So how
Office.
does he sleep at night?
Well, I don't know, but it's just not right. All of these, the use of the courts, the use of prosecutors, the use of all these federal agencies to change our political landscape is wrong, and we should be debating about it. What President Biden did with his censorship project is he forced He told the social media companies, we're going to withdraw, we're going to bring an antitrust case against you, and we're going to withdraw your Section 230 immunity, which is existential for those companies, if you don't give us a portal to censor. And then who did he give access to that portal? The CIA, the FBI, CISA, the IRS, NIH. So you had all these federal agencies that were now able to silence people who were questioning their policies. And that is really anti-American and anti-democratic.
Yeah, it is. And by the way, not for nothing, and I hate to be petty, but you know me by now. Dude's in New York for 2 different appearances, one Monday night and one Tuesday morning, and he can't get like a second suit or even a second tie. I mean, I know it's petty, but yeah, if I'm going to New York and I'm doing a couple of different TV appearances, I'm at least going to bring a couple of ties just to mix it up a little bit. Or did he just pull an all-nighter? I know I'm distracting from the major issue at hand here, but I just find it fascinating. The guy's a Kennedy. The guy's a Kennedy. And he can't bring 2 suits with him to New York? All right, we'll set it aside for a minute. You know what's fascinating to me about this entire escapade, either from Aaron Burnett on CNN or even the people at Fox and Friends who, listen, they're good people, and I like them, and I know that they're focused on sort of the political angle here. But what about the constitutional angle? This isn't even about winning an election, what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is talking about here. He's talking about a sitting president of the United States. He just laid it out in front of 2 sets of journalists, if you want to call Aaron Burnett a journalist, and the Fox and Friends host, where he just said that the president of the United States opened up a portal, demanded a portal between the FBI, CIA, NIH, and other powerful agencies within the federal government directly to social media companies to silence the voices of American people who were voicing their dissent. And all they want to talk about is, oh, but Trump, and well, is that going to give you an angle? And why aren't these journalists worried about the First Amendment? Why don't they double down and say, wait, let's talk about this more. Let's give more attention to this. Let's give this fire a little bit more oxygen because it should blaze from the highest rooftops and mountaintops of America, because we have a president who is using his power and the power of his incredibly intimidating agencies to censor the voices of not just a Kennedy, not just a Trump, but of this little guy and you little guy. Isn't that kind of a problem? Over at the Washington Post, last time I checked, they called themselves a newspaper. In fact, last I checked, their motto is democracy dies in darkness. And they saw Kennedy's appearance on Aaron Burnett's CNN last night. And the only way they could cover it was this way. RFK Jr. argues Biden is bigger threat to democracy than Trump, drawing criticism. And by the way, I just want you to know, that is a rewrite from the headline earlier this morning. Earlier this morning, the headline was RFK Jr. rebuked for claiming Biden a larger threat to democracy than Trump. So in other words, the entire angle of the story was that he was being rebuked, not the fact that he claimed Biden was. But so they had to put the drawing criticism in here. I want to read you the first few paragraphs of this bastardization of journalism, this poor excuse for exercising First Amendment rights. The first paragraph, are you ready for this? Independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. repeatedly advanced an argument Monday that President Biden poses a greater threat to democracy than Donald Trump, a comment that drew swift rebukes from several historians and experts. Can you give us the names of these historians and experts? But that's the lead. That's the story. The story is that he's being rebuked by historians and experts. But it gets better. Look at the second paragraph. Are you going to give us the details? Well, sort of. Kennedy, speaking to CNN's Aaron Burnett on Monday night, criticized the Biden administration's push for social media companies to monitor their platforms for medical misinformation. Now, you would think that they would go from there, the Washington Post, to sort of explore the details of how the Biden administration censored Americans with their power and by intimidating these social media companies. No. The very next sentence, the very next breath out of the reporter at the Washington Post's mouth says, Kennedy was temporarily banned by Instagram for spreading misinformation online about vaccines. So in other words, the Washington Post is adding to the narrative that the Biden administration demands, that he's a vaccine conspiracy theorist. Kennedy claimed Biden was censoring me and is weaponizing federal agencies. But the third paragraph is absolutely my favorite. You'll see in this paragraph that they have this little hyphenate in the middle of the sentence, and then which adds more content, almost like a parenthetical statement, right? So like if you take out the hyphenate chunk in the middle, the parenthetical statement, and just give the sentence is, he added that Trump is not a significant threat to democracy. All right. So what did they have to stick in the middle there contextually within the hyphens? I'll read it to you. Instead of just saying he added that Trump is not as significant a threat to democracy, the Washington Post wrote this. He added that Trump, who has alarmed some experts with rhetoric and stances they have compared to authoritarian leaders, plotted a more extreme second term and inspired his supporters to fight the results of the election he continues to falsely claim was stolen, is not as significant a threat to democracy. That's a hell of a parenthetical statement in the middle of that sentence, isn't it? I mean, usually an editor would say, yeah, could you just get to the point here? We don't need to add all the fluff and frills. But my guess is the editor actually injected that afterwards. Oh, you need to give more context about Trump. He added that Trump, who has alarmed some experts with rhetoric and stances they have compared to authoritarian leaders, plotted a more extreme second term and inspired his supporters to fight the results of an election he continues to falsely claim was stolen, is not as significant a threat to democracy. That's the Washington Post being the Washington Post. Why is CNN and Aaron Burnett and journalists everywhere in the Washington Post and everybody else sort of piling on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. right now? Well, because he's going to help Trump win. He's not trying to. That's just what's going to happen. If you look at any of the polls right now, Biden's popularity is so low, even among Democrats, that Democrats are looking for an alternative. And there are plenty of Democrats who like the idea of a Kennedy, who like the idea of not having to latch their name to this loser of a president, loser of an administration, loser of an economy, loser of a border policy, loser of a foreign policy. And so they'll sure, yeah, listen, I can't vote for Trump, but I'll vote for this guy. Right now, if you look at the Electoral College estimates over at Real Clear Politics and take all of the toss-up states out of the mix, like right now, if you're within 5 points, they call it a toss-up state. But if you win by 5 points, you win by 1 percentage point, you win the state. So instead of calling it a toss-up state, what they've done is they said, okay, whoever's ahead, even if it's just by 1 percentage point, give them the state. And if they do that, Trump wins. Trump wins bigly if the election is today, including winning Wisconsin and Michigan and Georgia and Pennsylvania and Arizona. And part of that is because in a 5-way race, Joe Biden can barely get to 40% because of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. That's why you're seeing headlines like this: Democrats unite against RFK Jr. That's the write-up at the Hill. That's, by the way, cynically speaking, why they won't give him Secret Service support. They'd be just fine with things, going a certain way. I wouldn't put it past them, would you? It's why on St. Patrick's Day, the Biden administration made a big show of having a certain Irish Catholic American political family over to celebrate the 17th day of March. Look at this picture. This is Joe Biden with his grandchildren. Not all of them, of course. The one that was conceived with a stripper after a pole dance and a special VIP encounter with his son, Hunter. We don't talk about her because he's a big family man, But this is Joe Biden in the center there with his children. And all those other people that all sort of look alike, that's the Kennedy family. This is not an accident. There's a reason for this. The message is being sent loud and clear. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is not one of us. We don't care if he's family. We don't care if he's genetically our brother or our uncle or our grandfather. We don't care that he's got Kennedy blood. We don't care that he carries the name of one of the martyrs of our family. No, because some things are more important than family. Democrat. That's more important. And that's why this picture is out there that was meant to be an intimidation tactic against RFK Jr. Let's just be clear here. I'm a conservative Republican. I have no interest in Robert F. Kennedy Jr. being president. None at all. I don't want him in anywhere near the White House unless it's to commemorate the assassination of his uncle. That'd be appropriate for him to be there, I suppose. But no, I don't want him to be president, not by a long shot. I mean, he's a crazy left-wing liberal. No, no. But I'm also fascinated by the political process, and I'd love to see Democrats foisted on the petard of their own hypocrisy. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. represents that. And, of course, I said Democrats, which means the media as well. He's dragging the media right down with him, showing their hypocrisy even more so. The man is running for president. He's a Kennedy, and he just proclaimed on 2 major cable networks. Yes, that's right. I'm calling CNN a major cable network. That the Biden administration censored him and everyday Americans, and the case is being heard before the Supreme Court right now. We all know that fact, and every journalist in America, they don't want to focus on that. They don't want to focus on the truth of that. All they want to focus on is, oh, but you're hurting Biden. He's going to be a major factor in the election coming up. Major factor in the election. That's why you saw the reaction you saw today. Our friends at Birch Gold have a very important message for you. You know, financial experts thought that we were in the clear. Things were looking rosy, sunny. We were going to get 6 interest rate drops this year. And then the inflation news came out in February, and it was up again because, well, this administration doesn't know what they're doing, and they have no handle on it. Now, instead of 6 interest rates, we got nothing in February, and we'll be lucky if we get 3 this year. This problem is not going away. It can't. The math won't let it go away. The U.S. is $34 trillion in the hole, but we keep printing money, which pushes the prices you pay every day even higher. So you can either bury your head in the sand about it, or you can do something about it. Diversify a portion of your savings into gold with Birch Gold Group. Gold is your hedge against inflation, and Birch Gold makes it really easy to own. Listen to this. They'll help you convert an existing IRA or 401k to a tax-sheltered IRA in gold. That's right. And you don't pay a penny out of pocket. They've got an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied customers. You can trust Birch Gold too. So all you got to do to get the information is text Larry. That's my name. That's the name of the show. Larry. Text Larry to 989898. Get your free info kit on gold. It's free. And then talk to a precious metal specialist on how you can protect your savings from persistent inflation with gold. Text Larry to 989898 right now. Well, I am sorry to have to inform you that Hillary Clinton just won't go away. She was on Jimmy Fallon's Tonight Show last night. And, Jimmy wanted to reminisce about the Easter egg roll on the South Lawn back before it was called Transgender Visibility Day. And then the conversation led to the current presidential election. Let's take a watch.
I was lucky enough to go to the White House Easter egg roll last Easter. Mm-hmm. And so they had the same thing, nice Easter bunnies walking around. I think it was one of President Biden's assistants.
Yeah.
And he's talking to the bunny like it's their assistant. He's like, so anyway, blah, blah, blah. And I go, hey, stop talking to this bunny. People are going to think that you're crazy. No one knows that that's your assistant. Everyone thinks the president is talking to the Easter bunny. So stop doing it.
I mean, you can imagine.
All right. So real fast here. That's a nice cover job, Jimmy. But no. Joe Biden really was talking to the Easter bunny. And he really thought he was talking to the Easter bunny because, listen, it was charming when Jimmy Stewart did it with Harvey and he imagined he saw a big 6-foot-tall rabbit. But Joe Biden actually has mashed potato for brains. And I know they're trying to come up with a cover story now, but it took them over a year to do it. No, Joe Biden, in fact, was talking to the Easter bunny, and you can never convince me otherwise. All right, well, let's keep watching.
What Trump would do with that. Right?
Oh, and he did. He did do it, yeah.
No sense of humor. No sense of humor at all.
Yeah.
Come on. They were telling jokes.
Can we talk about the upcoming presidential election?
Oh, no.
Yes, we have to. We have to. No more Easter bunny talk. Yeah. I mean, it's Biden versus Trump.
Yes,
we know that.
It is. It is.
What do you say to voters who are upset that those are the two choices?
Get over yourself. Those are the two choices.
Yeah, love that.
Right? And
good.
It's kind of like, one is old and effective and compassionate, has a heart, and really cares about people. And one is old and has been charged with 91 felonies.
Yeah, okay.
I mean...
Okay, interesting.
I don't understand why this is even a hard choice, really. I don't understand it.
Yeah.
But we have to go through the election, and hopefully people will realize what's at stake, because it's an existential question. What kind of country we're going to have, what kind of democracy we're going to have. And people who blow that off are not paying attention, because it's not like Trump, his enablers, his empowerers, his allies are not telling us what they want to do. I mean, they're pretty clear about what kind of country they want.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Get up.
Yeah, we are clear about the country that we want. You know, one with secure borders and a dollar that's worth a dollar, and functioning city streets with no crime or poop on the sidewalks, and the police empowered to actually arrest criminals, and prosecutors empowered to put them behind bars so that we can have that. You know, we've been pretty clear about the fact that we want our schools to be free of political indoctrination. And she's right. She's right. We are pretty clear about the country that we want. And by the way, they've been clear through their actions and what they've done to our country about what kind of country they want. So she's right. You know, there's a couple of things here that are so on brand for Hillary Clinton. Can we just revisit them quickly? Hang on a
What
second.
about the upcoming presidential election?
Oh, no.
Yes, we have to. We have to. No more Easter Bunny talk. Yeah. I mean, it's Biden versus Trump. We know that.
It is. It is.
What do you say to voters who are upset that those are the two choices?
Get over yourself. Those are the two choices.
Yeah, love that.
Right? And
it's so unlike Hillary Clinton to appear to be a lecturing, stern school marm telling you to get over yourself and just do what I tell you. She has no self-awareness of how she comes across. Oh, good God, seriously, the greatest. I want to erect a statue to Donald Trump for one reason and one reason only, and it's because he single-handedly kept this woman from being president. This is truly his greatest achievement occurred on election night. Amongst his greatest achievements. Furthermore.
Yeah, good.
And, you know, it's kind of like one is old and effective and compassionate, has a heart, and really cares about people. And one is old and has been charged with 91 felonies.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny that they throw that around all the time. Charged with 91 felonies, charged with... You know that old saying that a prosecutor can get a grand jury to prosecute a ham sandwich, right? U.S. attorney, a district attorney could get a grand jury to prosecute a ham sandwich, right? There's some truth to that. You know, the grand jury process is one-sided. The prosecution lays out their case. The defense doesn't really have much to do. They can't do a whole lot to defend themselves because it's just the arraignment process or the pretrial process to come up with charges. So it's almost as though in heavily Democratic districts like Atlanta, Georgia, New York City, and Washington, D.C., they just wanted a political talking point to make it seem like Donald Trump was a crook. So they threw a bunch of charges at him, got a grand jury to bring the charges so that they could just go on the Tonight Show and say, well, you know, he's got 91 felonies. Talk to me about convictions. Talk to me about convictions that don't, that will survive an appeals process. That said, a little bit more from Hillary that's so on brand.
Okay. Okay, interesting.
I don't understand why this is even a hard choice, really. I don't understand it.
Yeah.
But we have to go through the election, and hopefully people will.
I don't understand why it's a hard choice, but I guess we got to go through the election. We got to go through the election. I thought Democrats were really worried about, you know, anything that infringes on democracy and the democratic process here. I thought Democrats loved elections. I guess we got to go through an election. I find that actually to be a more insidious election tampering or election denial than anything they've ever accused Donald Trump and his supporters of. Sitting there on the Tonight Show with his arrogant, and by the way, you never see, Donald Trump will not be invited on Jimmy Fallon's show. Talk about equal time. There will never be a similar stature Republican that is allowed on there to say, well, I mean, it's no doubt that the vote should go with Donald Trump, right? And so she gets a one-sided conversation to basically roll her eyes and say, I don't even know why we have to do this election, but I'm sure everyone will do the right thing. You know the right way to go. This is a good moment to remind you who she is and who all her friends are. I keep hearing election denial a lot. You know, the RNC on their RNC Research Twitter feed, they've got this really handy-dandy video available. Look, you can see it down here in the lower right corner, maybe 23 minutes long, 23 minutes of nonstop election denial.
You can run the best campaign. You can even become the nominee, and you can have the election stolen from you.
How can you win with Russian interference, though?
That's
That's
real
what I'm
thing.
scared about
No,
in 2020.
But rightly.
Because I think he's an illegitimate president that didn't really win. So how do you fight against that in 2020?
You are absolutely right.
He's an illegitimate president in my mind.
Would you be my vice presidential candidate? Folks, look, I absolutely agree.
Trump didn't actually win the election in 2016. He lost the election, and he was put into office because the Russians interfered.
Russia interfered with our election, attacked our democracy for the sole purpose of artificially placing someone at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. They were successful.
Okay. And by the way, that guy, not this guy, the guy right before, is now the minority leader for the Democrats. He's next in line to be Speaker of the House of the Democrats. If you ever get the majority in the House, this is who they are. These are the real election deniers, and you know it. By the way, this video is really just about the 2016 election, but you can add a video about the 2004 election, when they claimed that John Kerry was the real winner and George W. Bush stole it because of the Diebold voting machines in the state of Ohio. That was back when Ohio was a swing state along with Florida. Now those states are solidly Republican, so they found other places to try to steal elections. I mean, to win battleground elections. There's, in fact, a whole documentary done on HBO, I think it was, about how John Kerry was the legitimate winner of the 2004 election. And of course, you could also do a whole video montage of the 2000 election. Please don't get me started about that, with Al Gore and the Supreme Court and hanging chads. The New York Times just did an obituary on Joe Lieberman, who was the running mate for Al Gore in 2000. And in the lead paragraph of the obituary of Joe Lieberman, they said that he was the running mate for Al Gore, who ran for president in 2000 and until George Bush was awarded the presidency when the Supreme Court stopped the recount in Florida. That's how the New York Times just framed it, continuing to deny the 2000 election. But, it doesn't end there. They can go all the way back literally to 1980 when Ronald Reagan won the presidency. Because at that time, that's when they invented the idea of the October surprise. In 1980, the rumor was that Ronald Reagan worked with the CIA and the Iranians to hold the hostages through the election to make Jimmy Carter look bad so Ronald Reagan could win the presidency. That's right. This is nothing new for them. We recently talked about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his uncle, and let's face it, in 1960s, they really did steal the election that year. I think most historians acknowledge that at this point. So spare me all of the hand-wringing and pearl-clutching and exasperation over a stolen election and election deniers and the interference with an election. That's what Hillary Clinton was doing on Jimmy Fallon. That's interference with the election. But even more so, and frankly, I think more entertaining, the reason that Hillary Clinton was on The Tonight Show was to promote her latest project. She's producing a Broadway musical.
I actually have been to a few Broadway plays with you in attendance as well. But I sometimes I go in to see a play, sneak in, whatever like that. People recognize me. That's cool. I walk in, I'm sitting there. People go, that's pretty cool. You walk in, standing ovation. Standing ovation. Everyone's like, people love you, especially in New York. People love you. And I go, wow, that's it. And then it was a pleasure. It was an honor to sit next to you.
Yeah. Wow. That's just embarrassing, Jim. You know what? She should go to a NASCAR race in Alabama and see how many people give her a standing ovation. Color me shocked that in a Broadway play, everybody stands for Hillary Clinton. But, it's really just the venue, man. It's venue specific how she's going to be greeted. I promise you. So what do we know about this Broadway musical? Well, here's a little 30-second ad. It's called Suffs. Yeah, you heard me, Suffs. It's like cats, but it's Suffs.
In 1913, women in this country were not allowed to vote.
But we were allowed to fight. So that's what we did. We fought and we marched in hats. Really big hats. And very uncomfortable shoes. We were suffragists. We demanded the right to be heard. But progress takes persistence.
And the road to equality is long.
Which is why we keep on marching.
But in way more comfortable shoes.
Suffs, a new Broadway musical produced by Hillary Clinton and Malala Yousafzai. Previews begin March 26th.
Wow, doesn't that look great? Suffs, now and forever. Come on. This is going to do for the suffragette movement what Alexander Hamilton did for the Federalist Papers. It's going to be huge. You know, I used to work on Broadway. This used to be my business. This was my industry. Before I became a political commentator and talk show host, and Andrew Breitbart discovered me and plucked me out of my old life, I was a manager of Broadway theaters and Broadway shows out in Los Angeles. I worked in New York for about 5 years. So you know I'm excited about this, right? Do you want to see a little bit of the show? Do you want to see how great it's going to be? Here's a little bit of Suffs, the musical, produced by Hillary Clinton.
Though not a word was spoken, our volume only grew. As winter turned to spring, we never left the avenue. The young are at the gates, the young are at the gates, silent and delirious. The young are at the gates, 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 shivering and serious. The young are at the gates.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I prefer more colorful costumes. The dancing was a little stale, a little stilted. I prefer a few more high kicks, maybe some spangles, that looks really rough, man. That looks really, really rough. But they're very intense and they're very super serious about what they do. And that's all that matters. What were the lyrics there? The owner at the gates? Or the overactive gaze? I couldn't quite make it out. Either way, that's a pretty good description for most Broadway musicals anyway. Yeah, I used to work in that industry. Want to know why I got out? Because of that. That's why I got out. In Washington, D.C. this week, there is a disbarment hearing for a gentleman named Jeff Clark. Now, Jeff Clark worked in the Trump administration. He's gotten caught up in the whole Fulton County RICO thing. You know, anybody who was an advisor or even a lawyer for Donald Trump at the end of his presidency, post-election day, they basically got called racketeers, part of the mafia that Fani Willis is going after. Here's a video that's been tweeted out here of a hearing that took place in D.C. Mr. Clark is having to deal with his own criminal process with Fani Willis in Fulton County. But, you know, we got to pile on these poor people and we got to try to ruin their lives. John Eastman, one of the top legal advisors of Donald Trump, just got disbarred out in California. And now poor Mr. Clark, he's facing disbarment in Washington, D.C. And so they had a hearing. And in his defense, Mr. Clark called a gentleman named Mark Wingate. So who is Mark Wingate? Mark Wingate is a member of the Fulton County Board of Elections. And Mr. Wingate refused to certify the election results in Fulton County. And during this hearing, he was asked why. And he had many, many answers. Just so you know, if you want to focus here, this is one of those Zoom hearings where everybody's all over the place on camera and stuff. Mr. Wingate is in the lower right-hand corner here. And everybody else is either appearing from their home or in a part of the hearing room there in Washington, D.C. Take a listen to this.
The things that led me initially to have concern about everything was much, much earlier in 2020. And I can't remember exactly when I began. I started looking at our voter rolls. And, you know, I did, you know, some fairly simplistic research on the population of Fulton County, Georgia. And what I found out, and of course started pressing that with the elections department, you know, through subsequent monthly meetings, et cetera, was that the numbers that I was able to ascertain, we had more voters on the active voter rolls than we did of the population of the entirety of Fulton County, and then extrapolating for those of voting age. So that became a major concern of mine, and frankly, you know, lasted throughout and continued even after the 2020 election. So that was a big issue, and of course, inside that 2020 timeframe, really there was nothing done to wasn't time, and I understand all of that, but there was nothing done to answer my questions on that. And that I thought, well, look, it's only fair to the voters of Fulton County that we're having clean voter rolls here, so that nobody's vote is disparaged because somebody may have come in and voted that frankly legally should not be able to. So I think that's very, very important, whether it be Fulton County or anywhere in the country. But from that, in the 2020 election itself, I had and other board members had requested that we obtain the chain of custody documentation from the department. And none of that was ever delivered.
All right. Now, this stuff doesn't need a whole lot of further explanation, but I just want, in case you got lost in there, two major issues right there. There's more that Mr. Wingate discovered that kept him from certifying the election in Fulton County, refusing to certify it. Number one, the voter rolls. Suddenly he saw that on the voter rolls, there were more people registered to vote than the actual population of the county. Now, why is that important? Well, it means, especially in 2020, when ballots were mailed to everyone, that there would be all of these live ballots that were sent out for people who shouldn't have been on the voter rolls, ballots that before they were even mailed out were invalid, let alone when they're returned, right? And so that's a huge, huge opening for fraud and cheating and ballot stuffing, right? Now, and then secondarily, the other question was, when these votes started coming in, these ballots started coming in, could you show us the chain of custody? Like, they came in, were they locked down? Were they secured? Who had access to them? Who could tamper with them? They never gave them a chain of custody on the ballot. So in other words, theoretically, boxes of ballots could just show up and nobody knows exactly where they came from, and suddenly they'd start counting them. Now, I know what you're thinking, because you're smart. You're very smart. You're thinking that all of that is fine and that's terrible and it shouldn't happen, but none of it would matter if you have basic protocols in place to validate an actual ballot, right? So it doesn't matter if people send in fraudulent ballots. It doesn't matter if there's no chain of custody, as long as you only count ballots that have valid signatures, ID, dates, things like that, right? Then you'd have a problem. Well, I think you know where I'm going with this.
Since we asked and did not receive any of it, that to me is just one reason. Well, how can I trust, as a board member to certify this election when I cannot receive even a sampling, anything at all with regards to chain of custody documents? So that was just another one of the things in my mind leading up to certification that was something that certainly was not fulfilled. There was also for that election, the advent of this whole Dropbox circumstance was unveiled, and then we had, I think Fulton County, we had like 36 or so drop boxes located around the county, and these drop boxes at that particular point were set outside of an early voting location, which means that they're in the elements. They're 24 hours a day, but there were surveillance cameras as required that supposedly were operating 24/7 so that they could be monitored, and anybody tried to do any damage or anything nefarious to any of those locations, that could be looked at, and hopefully somebody sent out there to secure the situation. But we'd ask for not every surveillance tape, but ask to see surveillance tapes on a basically whatever. Just give us some samplings of that so we can take a look at it, because I knew that this was going to be an important issue because of all the hullabaloo that any of us that were alive in those days, was witnessing as being an issue. And from that request, again, to just, the way in which it turned out, there was never one surveillance tape an inch of footage that was ever delivered to the board.
So the members of the Fulton County Board of Elections asked for chain of custody information to make sure that ballots were kept secure and free from any tampering, and they never got that chain of custody information. And they asked for surveillance footage on these unprecedented new drop boxes that were out for the first time in the history of their elections, out in the elements that anyone could stuff anything into. And they were denied access to any surveillance footage just so they could do a spot audit to make sure that everything was copacetic. And, well, there's more.
We had such a huge number of absentee by mail ballots. And those ballots, we as the department and the board, and then the Board of Commissioners who has to approve, certain expenditures, because it was, becoming very clear that there was going to be a larger amount of absentee by mail ballots this election year than by far than in previous years. So they found a terminus system that is called Bluecrest. And the Bluecrest platform primarily was an absentee by mail or a paper ballot processing application. And that would, scan in the outer oath envelopes. It would open them. It would then pull them out. It would flatten them, as they call it, and then put them in bundles for, for later processing and scanning. Part of that, or one of the applications or elements of that Bluecrest platform, was an electronic signature verification component. And of course, we all, as that was reported, we all thought that was going to be up and running, and how, how exactly that the department of people there for managing the absentee by mail ballot processing would have a very fine function in the electronic signature verification component. Well, as I recall, I believe that time frame was in October at the board meeting for October. I had asked the question, where are we with regards to the functionality of the electronic signature verification component? And I was told that the technicians from Bluecrest were in our building that day, and that they were working to functionalize the electronic signature verification. We had.
I love the way bureaucrats and people talk, functionalize. In other words, they were trying to get it to work. So we know that we're going to be inundated, overwhelmed with mail-in ballots, and we've got to verify these signatures. So they got this new program, this apparatus, this machine that would do it automatically, and they could never get it working. Now, if you can't get the signature verification machine working so that you can verify the signatures on this overwhelming number of mail-in ballots for the first time in history in Fulton County, then what do you do? What do you do?
What did we do for signature verification? And the comment I got back was, which frankly at that time floored me, was, well, we didn't do any. And I remember I forget where I was, I was on a phone call. I forget exactly, and I apologize. It's been so long. But, I do remember that comment that, we didn't do any. Now, of course, I took that saying, all right, well, by law, you've got to do signature verification. You've got to at least have somebody looking at this. And one side of that is that whomever you have that is looking at and supposed to be, verifying signature, that if there is no signature on the oath envelope, then how are you curing that, or what are you doing with them? And I remember going down, on from that and said, well, there weren't many, so we just sent them back out, and if they reply on time, then they'll get their vote counted. And I thought that was a little weak, but anyway, that's as I recall, that's what I was told.
So let's summarize here. The man who sits at the Fulton County Board of Elections chose not to certify the election. And by the way, he goes on in his testimony to say that there were over 100,000 ballots that he thought should be called into question here. over 100,000. He noticed that there were more people registered on the voter rolls than the actual population of Fulton County. He demanded that they have a chain of custody on all of the ballots that are being mailed in and dropped off, and that never happened. He demanded to see surveillance footage on the drop boxes, and he never got to see it. He wanted to make sure that they had signature verification per the law in the state of Georgia, so that you only count a mail-in or dropped-off ballot if the signature has been verified, and the machinery that was used wasn't working, and so therefore there was never any signature verification done. And he, as a duly elected member of the Fulton County Board of Elections, said, well, I cannot in good conscience certify this election based on all of this. And according to Joe Biden and the Democrats and the media, and sadly, a good portion of the Republican Party in Washington, D.C., Mark Wingate is the problem in this scenario. He's an election denier. He's working counteractive to our democratic process. He's going to ruin our democracy. No. Actually, the way you preserve democracy, the way you preserve the democratic process used in a constitutional republic is to make sure that elections are done. Not just... It's easy to say, make sure it's a fair election. It's easy to say to make sure it's a legal election. That should be the bare minimum. But you know what we want right now? All we ask at this point is that when we walk away from the election, we at least don't think it was robbed right before our eyes. And when you hear this stuff 3 years later, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to get there. But here's the interesting thing. Mr. Wingate is, as I mentioned, a witness in the disbarment hearing for one of the lawyers who's gotten caught up in the Fulton County RICO case. And this was his testimony in that forum. Mr. Wingate, I'm guessing, is sure to be a witness in the criminal proceedings that Fani Willis is bringing against Donald Trump and this whole host of advisors and lawyers that were working with Donald Trump post-election day in 2020. Mr. Wingate will testify in open court before a jury exactly what he said here, and he won't be the only one. I think what might end up happening with this overreach from Fani Willis against Donald Trump in Fulton County is that right in the middle of the summer, if the trial does go forward, right in the middle of the summer, it will be revealed to the American people as they watch the trial exactly how awful the Fulton County election was in 2020. And all of the charges against Donald Trump will actually make a whole lot of sense from the Trump perspective. That's how this whole thing could, in fact, bite Fani Willis and the Democrats right in the end. In Chicago, Illinois, bastion of Democrat politics, I don't think they've had a Republican in charge of that city or in charge, God, over 100 years, probably more, right? Well, everyday Chicagoans have had enough. They've had enough of their city resources being drained by the Democrats who run that city, accommodating the Democrat who is sitting in the White House to try to cover up and deal with and mitigate the disaster that is illegal immigration as it lives out every single day in that fair city. I want you to look at this woman who testified at a local city council meeting. Does she look like a right-wing Republican? Does this look like somebody who would beat up Jussie Smollett in the middle of the night in Chicago? Does she look like she's from MAGA country? I want you to listen to what she has to say about how things are currently in Chicago and who she blames for it. And I also want you to hear the reaction of the people in the room and just let your imagination take off for you. Do you think these are Trump MAGA hat wearing Republicans who are upset in Chicago? Or do you think these are Obama Biden Democrats? Take a watch.
I'd like to start off with something Edward Snowden, a whistleblower, once said. He said, when exposing a crime is treated as committing a crime, you are being ruled by criminals. Yeah. Everyone in this room recognizes that what's happening surrounding the nonstop influx of illegal aliens is criminal.
Yes.
Everyone recognizes that something evil is among us, and Americans Americans are not ready for the fundamental impacts this will have. In fact, we can't even fathom it because we've never seen anything like this.
Right.
We have an administration that is run by criminals who hate America.
Yes.
That's why they protect these criminals.
Yes.
Police have been instructed from above to not mess with them.
Right.
So no matter what these criminal aliens do, they're always released. It's not an accident. This is by design.
Yes.
And we have a garbage media that gets paid for lousy coverage. We have a media that protects criminals.
Yes.
It seems as if every level of government has been bought out.
Mhm.
It really makes you wonder how many seats in government have been bought out by foreign influence. And we have a government that uses language to weaponize the masses.
Mhm.
They're not illegal aliens, they're asylum seekers.
Right.
They're refugees.
Right.
And they throw these terms around so that the people of America feel guilty. Because nobody wants to be a bad person. We all aim to be good. But there's a distinction between goodness and tolerance. There's a difference between goodness and naiveness. And unfortunately, I believe the majority of Americans are not acting out of the spirit of goodness, but rather out of the spirit of cowardliness and naiveness.
Yes.
And we have the Committee on Immigrant and Refugee Rights, headed by anti-American Alderman Andrew Vasquez. They really throw around those friendly terms, but I like to call them what they are: the pro-criminal committee, the anti-American committee.
Yes.
They're here not for people, but to destroy America. These groups are enemies of America. How many illegals are you housing in your home, Vasquez? Since you love them so much, house them in your own home. Use your own money to fund them.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to let her finish, but I just want to pause for a second and recognize what you're hearing, what you're seeing, where it's taking place. This is not some town hall meeting in the rural suburbs of Nashville. This is not deep in the heart of Texas. This is Chicago, Illinois. And this woman probably wasn't politically active at all, let alone politically active against what she's calling out as the anti-American criminal corruption in the Democratic Party that runs that city top to bottom. As the title on the video says, Chicago is waking up. Now, is Chicago or Illinois going to suddenly start voting Republican? No, they haven't done that since 1984. Of course not. But this is indicative of what's happening not just in Chicago, but literally in every major city in America. That includes just north of Chicago in Milwaukee, where Wisconsin's a little bit different. Also northeast in Detroit, where Michigan is also a little bit different. And can we also point out Pittsburgh and Philadelphia in the state of Pennsylvania? Yeah. And of course, Arizona is already 1,000% understanding exactly how their state is being destroyed by this president's policies. And they know very well who's responsible for it. It's April 2nd. And we've got, 7 months until Election Day? And this is already the energy against Joe Biden. Does anyone here think that they're going to let Joe Biden stay on the ticket all the way to November with this going on in Chicago? In fact, things have gotten very bad in Chicago and they're about to get worse. I'm going to share that with you in just a second, but I'm going to let this young woman finish.
So I have a message to my fellow Americans who will watch this on TV or YouTube.
That's right.
Whose side are you on? Are you on the side of criminals or are you on the side of this country?
Right.
Stop feeling like you're a bad person for calling them illegals. Stop letting our enemies gaslight us into believing we are racist or anti-immigrant.
Right. Speak, girl, speak.
A good person isn't a coward. A good person stands up for their neighbors.
Speak.
I'll finish with my favorite Martin Luther King Jr. quote, and I hope my fellow Americans ponder this. He once said, "The question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremists we will be. The nation and the world are in dire need of creative extremists."
Yes.
I mean, finishing with an MLK quote and everything. Don't let people call you a racist just because you want to follow the rule of law. Stop feeling ashamed for calling them illegal immigrants. That's what they are. Yeah, so things have gotten so bad in Chicago politically, the Democrats there, the mayor, needed to do something about it. So they're now enjoying headlines like this. Migrants to be moved out of 5 Chicago Park District sites. That's right, because right now in Chicago, because they have to house this overflow of people, they put them in city parks and set up tents and shelters there. They put them in schools and kicked the students out of the schools. They put them in YMCA's, boys clubs, all of these public facilities that the tax dollars of the city of Chicago had built and created programs for, inner city youths in the city of Chicago to be able to enjoy and have after school programs. And they're not allowed to do any of that now because it's all full of illegal immigrants, thanks to Joe Biden. Of course, the mayor hasn't done anything about it. If anything, the mayor's like, oh, yeah, we love this because, the Statue of Liberty and open arms and all that jazz. So they're getting this headline. That's it. Migrants are moved out of 5 Chicago Park District sites. We're moving them out. Don't worry, everybody. We're moving them out. But then you have to see this headline because he'll explain how they're moving them out and where they're moving them to. Chicago Tribune. Chicago and Illinois quickly moves thousands of migrants from shelters into homes. Homes across the south and west sides. But will they stay? Well, based on what we've seen from squatter rights laws in Democrat cities, I'm pretty sure they'll stay as long as they damn well please. Migrants across the city are leaving shelters in droves, their belongings stuffed into trash bags they load into Ubers or Lyfts, which they've often arranged themselves, to head to new homes. How are they getting new homes, you may ask yourself? More than 8 months after state and city leaders said they wanted to help thousands of migrants find homes in Chicago, the government assistance program covering their initial months of rent is moving faster than ever. That's right. The government of Chicago is paying months and months and months of housing costs and rent for illegal immigrants who are in this country against the law and continue to break the law every day they stay in this country. There are veterans of the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War who are injured or who have PTSD or are addicted to drugs because of the trauma that they suffered, who are living on the streets of Chicago, and they get nothing. But the people who came here illegally 6 days ago, because Kamala Harris really got to the root of the problem down there in Guatemala 3 years ago as our borders are, they're getting free rent. Migrants are now mostly settling in the south and west sides where they say rent is more affordable with the approximate $1,500 a month rental assistance they say they receive from the state. Working in partnership with the city nonprofit organizations in Chicago and case managers from Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Chicago, the state has spent $41.4 million so far to resettle more than 5,000 households, according to the Illinois Department of Human Services. So there you go. It's true. They get their big headline. Well, we're moving them out of the city shelters. Now you can have your parks back and your soccer fields and your boys club. Don't worry. We're going to make them disappear. And meanwhile, they're handing out $1,500 a month of free money to put them in a house. While the U.S. citizens who were born here, who have worked here, who have fallen on hard times for one reason or another, wallow away living in a cardboard box on the sidewalk. This is unsustainable. We know that as a nation. And the Democrats know it as a political force. They know that their time is running out. And I can only tell you, my friends, it's just going to make them that much more desperate. Be ready. Hunker down. Keep your head on a swivel. We're in this together. Thanks for watching today. Hey, subscribe to the podcast if you can, wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. And make sure you subscribe to this video that you're seeing. And if you like any of these individual segments today, if they tickled you, if they got you fired up, if you want to share them, please do that. Later on this afternoon, we will break them down into individual segments. We're going to put them up on the platform that you're watching right now. And I'd love it if you could like those videos, comment on those videos, and copy and paste that link to whatever social media platform you currently use and enjoy. It's really important to us, and it goes a long way. Appreciate you watching, and I appreciate you coming to all of our Town Hall media sites, townhall.com, hotair.com, redstate.com, PJ Media, Twitchy, and Bearing Arms. We'll be back for the next show tomorrow. I'm Larry O'Connor, and of course, you can call me Larry.